Have you ever looked at someone's life and thought, I wonder how they ended up like that? Maybe it's a woman holding a sign, a man panhandling. Maybe it's that same child dropped off at school every day, hungry and disheveled. But what if our knee-jerk reaction is different than we actually think? What if it's wrong? What if those people we so quickly judge are more like us than we think? This is the Not That Different podcast about the stories behind the statistics of homelessness, the real people behind that word. Because when we stop and we really start to listen and understand, something surprising happens. Individuals experiencing homelessness aren't those people. They're our brothers, sisters, mothers, fathers. They're our neighbors, the people God calls us to love. Today, we're talking with Ricardo León, President and CEO of the Cuyahoga Land Bank. His work focuses on restoring vacant and abandoned properties across Cuyahoga County, turning neglected spaces into opportunities for safe housing, neighborhood stability, and renewed community life. Through that work, and in partnership with organizations like the City Mission, he helps address one of the root challenges connected to homelessness: access to stable housing. I'm Jamie Buxton. I'm the Senior Manager of Community Engagement at the City Mission in Cleveland, Ohio. And it's my joy to help us pull back the layers of homelessness, to destigmatize what we think we know about people experiencing homelessness. So let's jump right in and start this conversation with Ricardo. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate you guys inviting me to be here, and shout out to all the listeners. I'm hoping this will be an interesting conversation.
I certainly hope it will too. We're humbled to be doing this. I still have no idea what we're actually doing here, Ricardo, so bear with me.
Same.
But this is just a conversation, and we don't know each other that well. We've bumped into each other a few times over working in collaboration together, so I'm really excited to learn more about you. I know that you've got a really big job and you've been in that role about 18 months, but tell me, what even gets you interested in the kind of work that you're doing? How do you fall into land bank?
Well, that's a great question. Land banking is an interesting industry, and I guess starting with how I kind of fall into it, my career's been interesting in that I started my career kind of in the startup world. I did my undergrad in economics at Baldwin Wallace, kind of worked in the startup world. I did my master's in urban studies at CSU. While I was there, I learned a lot about our ecosystem. I found out that Cleveland has one of the strongest kind of community and economic development ecosystems really in the country.
Okay.
We were one of a lot of the early kind of community and economic development work really spurred out of Cleveland for a number of reasons. One, because of the Levin School, right? What has historically been one of the best urban studies schools in the country, but also we have that deep philanthropic network here, Cleveland Foundation and others. Like we have a history of philanthropy.
Mm-hmm.
And then along the way, I had the opportunity to join a CDC that served the community where I grew up. So I grew up on the near west side of Cleveland in the Stockyards neighborhood. About a decade ago, 2016, my dad passed away unexpectedly. And at the time, my mom was alone. And so I made the decision, like, I need to find a job like close to home, And so the kind of same week that I made that decision, the job position, I found, like, someone sent it to me. It was like, hey, you might be interested in this. And it was the CDC gig at Metro West. And I was like, divine intervention, right? And so I ended up applying, got the job. I started working at Metro West. And my first job at Metro West was working with vacant and abandoned properties. So it's kind of like a full circle moment. So at Metro West, I worked at the CDC with community partners and with the land bank at the time, kind of more transactionally, in identifying vacant and abandoned properties in the community and then helping get those properties into the hands of residents who could bring them back to life.
Yeah.
And then kind of like a whole bunch of things happened where within 12 months of me being at the organization, I went from kind of being like the person who was like lowest on the totem pole, right? Like I was breaking into abandoned houses every day to running the organization. So that was an interesting turn of events. And then through that work, I ended up meeting my predecessor, Gus Frangos, rest in peace, who was an amazing leader in this industry.
Right.
I mean, he created the land bank industry. I'm happy to kind of go into detail on that. But he ended up offering me an opportunity to come join the land bank 4 years ago. And I joined the land bank originally as the chief operating officer, was chief operating officer for about 2.5 years. And then unfortunately, Gus passed away in summer of 2024. And when that happened, I had the opportunity to jump into the interim role just to kind of keep the ship going, right? Because
Right.
he had built this amazing thing.
Yeah.
And then the board in September of 24 hired me on as the CEO, so the permanent CEO. So yeah, about 18 months in now, it's been fun. It's been exciting. There's like the world is constantly changing, right? The environment, the housing market and environment is constantly changing. So it's really exciting to be kind of like boots on the ground in
Yeah.
neighborhoods. And I think one of the coolest things about the work the land bank does is that we work anywhere in the county, right? We serve all 59 municipalities, but we almost exclusively work in those historically disinvested neighborhoods, right?
Hmm.
The neighborhoods that have the most challenges, have the least investment, the least amount of resources, where partners, can help us, meet our mission of bringing properties back into productive use. And I think that's really exciting about the work of the Land Bank and City Mission is that how we have come together to not only help families, but help neighborhoods and communities, right? Because
Right.
one house at a time, yes, neighborhood scale, development is important, but ultimately, it happens one property, one person, one family at a time. And that's what
Hmm.
like I think is most exciting about the work that we do and the work that we get to do together.
Yeah. Wow, that's so much in such a short amount of time. Like you graduated grad school and just you were like going, and
Yeah.
it's just amazing. I love that you mentioned you're a Cleveland native. I knew that. I love that. And so exciting to be landing in a work that you're passionate about. Neither of us were in the roles that we're in right now, but we have a rich history, the City Mission and the Land Bank, of working together. And so I love that we kind of get to still interact and find ways to collaborate. And really, for the sake of this podcast, is educate and destigmatize what it is that we do and the people that we're really serving. Tell us, because I'm sure there are going to be many people who listen to this, what is a land bank?
So a land bank is at least in the context of Ohio. So Ohio is actually kind of one of the leaders in land banking in the country. So land banks have existed in some way, shape, or form going back to the 70s. Most of them, when you think about land banks, they're municipal land banks. So like the city of Cleveland, pretty much every municipality in Cuyahoga County has a land bank. Those are essentially just kind of departments of those municipalities. It's just like a department at City Hall, and they're passive in the sense that they just use them to hold land.
Okay.
So it's just a way for the cities to hold land, and then they can figure out, all right, how do we redevelop this? How do we partner with folks? Um, County land banks, so like Cuyahoga Land Bank is one of now 71 county land banks in Ohio. We were the first. We opened our doors in 2009. So we essentially serve as the community improvement corporation for Cuyahoga County. And so what that means is we have the powers to do community development work, economic development work, where we can transact, we can buy homes, we can rehab homes. The bulk of our work for really the first decade of our life was really to target vacancy and abandonment.
Okay.
So while Cleveland wasn't necessarily the epicenter of the mortgage foreclosure crisis, we were definitely one of the hardest hit communities.
Hmm.
And there were a handful of neighborhoods, I think of Slavic Village, Stockyards, the neighborhood I grew up in, and a handful of others that were really hit hard.
Right.
These neighborhoods were neighborhoods where more than half of all the properties in that neighborhood went through foreclosure.
Hmm.
I'm a firm believer that every resident of Cuyahoga County, right, that's our service area, should have the ability to live in a neighborhood that meets their needs, that has the amenities, that allows them to have a prosperous life. And for a whole bunch of reasons that we can't control, that's not the case today. And so
Hmm.
we've been, for 17 years, have been steadfast working to create those conditions, in collaboration with folks like you all.
Yeah. Oh, I love what you just said there, because that's the goal for us too, is when our residents leave us, we want them to have the choice in where they live, the kind of home that they feel comfortable, near a school that they are excited about for their children, in a community close to where they'll work, or, all the things we think about. I think so many times people would look at our work and say, oh, those people should just be grateful for housing. And that is not our heart at the mission. And so when we get to link arms with people like you who understand that and the dignity that it instills, when we give choice to our residents and where they're going to move on to, and how they're going to move on, that's what gets us excited about ministry. So let's talk about that, though, because there's a lot of challenges in housing in Ohio, but especially in this Cleveland area. What are some of the biggest challenges that you're seeing in Cuyahoga County?
Yeah, Cuyahoga County is super unique. I mean, we are with challenges, of course. I think it's happening across the country. Cuyahoga County is unique for a couple reasons. One is we have some pockets of super successful housing markets, right? Like
Hmm.
where homes are buying and selling, and you can own a home,
Hmm.
again, to your point, you have those amenities. And then we have kind of the opposite end of the extreme, where there are communities where there's no investment happening, where unfortunately there's a lot of speculative investments. So there's like, out of state buyers coming in and buying up the
Hmm.
properties. And not that there's anything wrong with that, but they're often not taking care of them the way they
Right.
should. And to your point, giving dignified housing
Hmm.
to the residents of our city and our county. So we're kind of in this stratification of, we've got some areas, we have the challenge of rapid price appreciation, right? Neighborhoods that maybe a decade ago you could buy a home for 70, 80,000, and today
Hmm.
those homes are maybe 3 or 400,000, and so you end up being priced out.
Right.
And then in those more challenged, kind of historically disinvested neighborhoods, the challenge is a broken housing market, right? The cost to build or renovate a home is more than what you can sell that home for. So no one's making the investment. Banks typically aren't lending. Again, unfortunately, what ends up happening is those communities end up becoming marginalized. They don't have access to the
Hmm.
transportation and the jobs and the neighborhood amenities. And so
Right.
it becomes kind of a cycle. And so in those communities, while we work to preserve affordability where possible, of course, sometimes in those communities, the strategy really is like, well, let's bring housing investment to this neighborhood so that, Mrs. Johnson, who's lived in her house for 30 years, can finally see a little bit of price appreciation when it comes time for her to give that, that property to her family, right? When her
Hmm.
heirs receive that property, they now have the opportunity to create generational wealth.
Right.
And it gives them the opportunity to get that leg up and kind of continue again the positive momentum. And so that's, I would say, kind of those two components are probably the biggest challenges we face. Is like we have this dichotomy, right? And then I think the other challenge that we see just kind of generally is overall across the county is just a lack of inventory.
Right.
So we don't when you think about like coastal cities or some of the more populated regions of the country, we're not seeing that kind of rapid change in housing and kind of gentrification. Everyone has their own version of that, but
Right.
we're not necessarily seeing that in a real way, in the way the New Yorks and LAs and San Franciscos of the world are. Our problem is actually that there's just not enough housing to go around, and so our argument is like we should be investing in housing of all different typologies, all different price points, with all different partners, so that we can increase the total inventory that then will help create more housing opportunities for everyone.
I'm learning so much. It's like actually hard for me to think about my next question. I read a stat a couple years ago that said something like Ohio needs 280,000 housing units to be able to house everyone in our state. And a lot of that is right here in our
Mhm.
Cleveland area. And so when I talk in big generalities, because this is not, everything I know really well, but when I'm talking to people about the mission, when I say lack of affordable housing, it really is very difficult for our residents. They come here, they get stability, they're empowered over their issues, they're ready. And it really is very, very difficult. Yes, there are vouchers, but there's a waiting list and really just not enough housing. And I heard you already say that, that's what you're working on. But I really think that if our listeners are here in Cleveland, I don't know that people really understand
Yeah.
that outside of the city. Like, how can we help people know that more other than just, no, really, there's a lack of affordable housing?
No, absolutely. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. Where I think where we think about this too, and kind of what we've kind of added to that description is not only lack of affordable housing, but a lack of quality, healthy, affordable housing.
Yes.
Because what we see a lot of, and I saw this a lot more in my role at the CDC at Metro West, because I was more proximate, like in the neighborhood. You know, I think there was a recent stat that said Cleveland is like one of the most affordable rental, cities in the country, which is fair, right? Certainly, again, compared to like the coastal cities. But what we saw a lot of, unfortunately, was um, residents renting a home that maybe didn't have running water, maybe had a
Hmm.
hole in the roof and it's leaking.
Yeah.
There might be mold. There might be, there are all these different rodents getting into the basement. There's all these different things that are happening because, unfortunately, what has happened is that kind of speculative investment market that, not all of them, but sometimes those investors don't really do what they need to do to make sure that those homes are quality homes.
Right.
And I think that's the challenge too. Is like, yeah, in theory, you can get a cheap house, whether it's renting or buying it, but are you going to be healthy? Are your kids going to be healthy? Is there lead in the home?
Hmm.
And then if you happen to be buying the home, is this really an investment that long term is going to help set your family up for that generational wealth
Well,
and
yeah.
success? Or is it going to be a money pit that's just going to end up hurting you more than helping you, right? But then also, I got to give credit where it's due. The city of Cleveland really is trying to kind of move the needle in this space as well, as
Hmm.
is the county.
Right.
Executive Ronaine and his team have a whole team of folks dedicated to help solve for this issue. Where again, we need housing of every typology at every price point that is dignified and healthy, and it allows all of us to be better off. I think if we can, we talk about this a lot at the land bank. Like if we can help those of us who have the least resources and the least means, then
Hmm.
all of us are better off. Even those of us who have the most resources and the most means,
Hmm.
because the more that we can help the people at the bottom and give them the opportunity to give them that hand and pull them up,
Hmm.
we all benefit from it collectively. We're all better off for
For sure.
it. Yeah.
What do you think about w- how do we help educate people
Mm.
perhaps who are coming out of generational poverty? Many of the residents that come to us have been raised in poverty. And so the dream of owning a house is exactly that. It's a dream.
Yeah.
Like, or it may not even be a dream. It is probably not even on their radar.
Mhm.
And so I think a lot of the work that we do, not home ownership isn't for
For sure.
everyone, right? But um, as we lean into that and teach people, what kind of resource do you think we need more available to
Mhm.
people to help them understand that this can be
Mhm.
in arm's reach for them?
That's a great question. I think some of the things, because we kind of run into this a lot. I think there's a handful of things, and thankfully a lot of this stuff is happening and growing.
Hmm.
A lot of it I think is home buyer education. I think and thankfully a lot of our financial institutions in town, but also our nonprofit partners in town have been investing heavily in
Hmm.
educating folks on what being a homeowner is. And to your point, homeownership may not be for everyone, and that's okay. If it's not, it's okay. But if you want to be a homeowner and you believe it's in your future, let's start you early, educating you on like what it takes to be a homeowner. And then the third piece really is the financing, right? The
Right.
getting folks to the point where they can get a mortgage and own a home. Historically, we have had some challenges, here in Cleveland of access to capital, particularly in historically disinvested neighborhoods.
Hmm.
And so one of the cool things that I can say is that is starting to change. And I do got to shout out our partners in this is CHN Housing. They have CHN credit in their Believe mortgage, and it's a mortgage that allows folks I think it's like a 540 minimum credit score, and allows folks who don't have that opportunity or maybe historically haven't had that opportunity to be bankable in a traditional way. Now they have this opportunity to pursue financing to own that home. So, again, it's to your point, it's not for everyone, but if you can pair the inventory with the education and the financing component, it at least makes the challenge much more feasible. There's still a lot of work that needs to get done. It's still a massive responsibility.
Right.
There's home ownership is just it's a challenge. It can be a challenge at times. But at least though here collectively in Cleveland, it's really cool to see that we're reaching this kind of this momentum. It's kind of like this flywheel where all of these elements are coming together at the same time.
So let's rewind a little bit and talk about kind of our history. I know, again, neither of us were kind of in those roles where, we were breaking ground together, 12 years ago. But there was a time in the city missions history where we were looking at this available housing,
Yep.
dignified housing, and said, we want to be part of this. I love this kind of part of our history. It's not something we're currently doing because
Yeah.
we weren't contractors. And so we had this great partnership where we were finding homes that were dignified in neighborhoods. You guys held the home for us. We had people working on construction and rehabbing homes, and then moving families into them. And then what we were doing was another like 2 years of wraparound services. I remember very vividly sitting in a meeting where I had heard that one of our mothers had a really high water bill, and everyone said, "What's going on?" Well, her toilet was running, and no one ever told her before because she'd never been a homeowner, like, hey, this is going to make an impact on your bill. And so she was hit with this, huge bill that she couldn't understand and had never. She was like, I just thought, when the toilet is doing that, someone's always fixed it or it just stopped. And it was such a learning curve for me just sitting in that room going, there is so much work to be done about the education and still walking with people in this process.
Yep.
So I'm glad to hear there's so many people across the city that are passionate and working in this. So we had, I think, we were trying to guess the math, about a dozen
Yep,
homes that we
right about
did
a dozen
that
homes.
with, and we had families living in them. It's been really cool. I know one of the families has actually, the mom had, I think, 7 kids when she moved into that home. Lots of her kids are now out of the home,
That's
and she has
amazing.
grandchildren. So she actually sold that home,
Nice.
and was able to downsize into a condo, but be able to afford that. And
Amazing. Yeah.
like, that's life changing. That's what we're
Absolutely.
talking about here. We're
Absolutely.
talking about generational wealth, and so cool to continue to see that. While we've kind of gotten out of that
Mm.
side of things, because like I said, we weren't great at contracting. We just recently added transitional housing.
Yep.
And so we have transitional housing at Laura's home. I know that wouldn't have happened for us. I know that wouldn't have been kind of a part of what we're doing now without those trailblazing days with the land bank and Gus
Absolutely.
Frango's
Absolutely.
helping us understand all of those things. And so grateful for how we still are connected, whether, it's directly or indirectly at this point. What role do organizations like the City Mission play in the broader solution to homelessness in our community?
Oh my goodness. I mean, I believe organizations like City Mission are the backbone of the work that's happening in our city. I mean, without you all coming to the table and helping people, the work that we do would just happen in a vacuum. So
Yeah,
to your point, the work we've been doing for over a decade together, you all were pioneers in that space. You all were one of the first kind of faith-based organizations to come to the table and say, hey, like, I think we can do something here that can create these generational opportunities and can get people out of this cycle. And so
hmm
we started working together over a decade ago, rehabbing those homes and through that partnership. And since then, yeah, we've done about a dozen together. But
hmm
that model that you all kind of pioneered and created, the land bank has done over 150 of those with a whole bunch of other partners too. And we took that experience of working with you all and which allowed us to see kind of what worked and what didn't work, and try and recreate and implement it and find different ways to work through that, to solve for that issue. But like this most recent kind of iteration of that work, which is the work that we did with Habitat together, where you all
hmm
were able to find folks to then take on that home ownership component. And then this transitional piece is super important. We often don't think about it. For those of us who've been blessed with the opportunity to be homeowners or at least be on that path to stable housing,
hmm
you don't really recognize or realize how important it is just to have kind of that roof over your head.
Right.
I had the opportunity to serve for a few years on the board of a permanent supportive housing provider here in town. And it was fascinating just kind of hearing these stories of, you, you the way you opened the segment was really fascinating, of like, we assume folks, like we assume people's stories when we see them. It was fascinating to see how many people they missed a couple paychecks, and those couple
Right.
paychecks is what created the solution. And I had a colleague of mine, former city planning director, Freddie Collier. I love Fred. And he used to have this saying: the average person is about 3 missed paychecks away from not having a stable housing situation.
Yeah.
I remember thinking about that in the moment. I'm like, man, that's fascinating. And then now, fast forward 5, 6 years later, I've had the opportunity to be kind of involved and in partnership with organizations that are fighting the good fight, and it's so true. And so that's why I think our type of partnerships and establishing these partnerships and supporting them and ensuring that organizations like City Mission and others have the funding that they need, have the strong leadership,
hmm
and have the ability to really have a seat at the table when decisions are being made, is what's ultimately going to allow us to continue solving for this issue. The reality is that, the economy is the economy. There's always going to be challenges, but the more resources and the more that we can offer kind of that wraparound service and supportive service,
hmm
I think the better off our residents will be. And again, shout out to you all. You all have been a leader in that space of, we're not just going to give you a house. We're going to give you a house, but we're going to meet with you. We're going to work with you. We're going to make sure you understand what it means, what it takes to really
Right.
be in this space. And if for whatever reason things don't go well, we're going to be here to help support you. And that support network, that support system, is such an amazing thing that, again, unfortunately, so many people don't have. But
Right.
it's amazing to see when a partner like you all is really kind of hand in hand helping deliver these services that are so needed in our community.
Well, thank you. But I think what you're drawing my attention most to in this conversation is really that we're not alone in that really there's an army of people that have empathetic, leaders and who are excited and passionate about this work. And so we don't have to do it in a vacuum. We don't have to be contractors
Absolutely.
anymore,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Because
yeah.
there's lots of other people and ways for us to link arms to solve this in the ways that we're good at,
Absolutely.
and then to depend on the people who are good at the other things to do well. So
Absolutely.
that excites me.
It's a beautiful thing to see. I'm sorry, it's a
No.
beautiful thing to see, and I think that again, you all and a handful of others I can think of have blended very well the faith and community together,
Hmm.
and it's just a beautiful thing to see, and again, the innovation that comes out of it is fascinating from where I sit.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think, we've talked a lot about a lot of big issues on this in this episode. And so if someone were to talk to you and say, housing issues are too big or too complex to understand, what do you want them to know?
Well, that's a great question. I guess the biggest takeaway out because I do have those conversations a lot with folks is they are super complex and kind of heady and very academic at times. But the bare minimum that we can do is just get involved and get to know your neighbors. It's fascinating what just a small group of like-minded individuals, whether it's a block club or a church
Hmm.
or a neighborhood association, can come together and really have amazing impact in their community by
Hmm.
using their voice, by being civically engaged, by partnering and showing up. The more that we can be engaging with each other as neighbors in neighborhoods, in communities, kind of working, fighting the good fight together. I think that
Hmm.
that is ultimately going to be beneficial to all of us. And again, I've seen really cool stuff happen when you just get folks in a room together and say, hey, we think we can help solve for this issue, and we may not have all the answers, but we think we have something there. And then
Hmm.
you go back 2 years later and you're like, whoa, like you guys did it. It's
Yeah.
amazing. And so that would be kind of my take with folks is like, just get involved, find a way to get involved. However, whatever works for you, it doesn't, and it's going to be different for everybody.
Yeah. I think I think about the young man that you're a young man now, but the young man, like, just showing up in that community, in your community. I mean, what advice would you give that person? Because really, you were faking it till you make it,
Yeah,
right?
100%. Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, spot on. That's a good question. It's funny. I think about this a lot. What I've learned is just take the leap of faith. Like if you believe in something, like again in community, right? Like everyone told me, you're like, why would you leave like the corporate world where you're making good money and you're traveling and you're doing all this cool stuff? Like, why would
Yeah.
you go work in the neighborhood you grew up in? Like, what are you talking
Yeah.
about? Like, and again, I had multiple reasons why I was doing it. Um, but taking that leap of faith and just trusting and saying, like, I don't know what's gonna come of this. I had no idea I'd end up where I am today. Like I was just going to like, I see a problem in my neighborhood. I've experienced it. I grew up next to an abandoned house that burned down, almost burned my mom's house down. Like I've seen it firsthand. But at the same time, I've seen other neighborhoods where they've been able to turn it around and
Hmm.
become quality neighborhoods with amenities, where people can, have access to resources. And so I said, well, if we can do it over there, we can do it here, and
Right.
and I got to, again, to your point, I got to jump in kind of head first into faking it till I was making it, trying to figure it out. And then we look back and, now you see you know, the neighborhood I used to serve, Clark Ford and Stockyard specifically, major investment from their anchor institution. There's a
Hmm.
major underway right now, commercial corridor investment, both in the Stockyards and Clark Ford neighborhood. We've seen the home ownership rates increase. We've seen the average condition of homes improve significantly across the board. And so, yeah, it's incremental and it takes time, but you see it happening one step at a time. It's like one foot in front of the other. And so, 7, 8 years later, being able to look back and still be involved in some way, right? The land bank
Right.
still participates to some extent, not as much as I used to for sure, but being able to see that work is like taking that leap of faith is what, and for me at least, initiated all of that,
Yeah.
and so that's kind of my advice to folks.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And you must take so much really healthy pride in that. And so that's awesome. Before we wrap up, what gives you hope when you think about the future of housing and community development here in the Cleveland or Cuyahoga County?
That's a great question. I mean, what gives me hope is it's this. It's like the work you all are doing, the work that our partners are doing, the work I get to be a part of. I get to meet with bright, amazing, talented individuals who genuinely care about our community, who want to see it better off. I don't know if it's like an underdog thing with Cleveland, like where we all kind of band together, but
Yeah.
like we seem to have kind of this very unique kind of approach to the work, at least at the community economic development level, where we all understand that it's better off if we partner together. I am blessed with the opportunity to I get to go to conferences and I get to kind of travel and meet other leaders that kind of in this space, from wherever they're from. And it does, while it happens in other places too, it does seem like we have kind of this unique, like very unique kind of blend of kind of right place, right time, right people, all working together towards a collective goal. And I think it's exciting. And again, we have amazing leadership at the city level, at the county level, at our organizational levels. And so I think we're kind of in this beautiful moment in time where, like, I think we'll have the opportunity to really see some dramatic impact over the next few years
Hmm.
just because of the willingness of people to come together and engage with each other.
You said something a little bit ago when you were talking about somebody said to you, most people are 3 paychecks away from, crisis, right? I think, is there anything that you would want to tell our listeners from your perspective about that? Like, when we see that person who's standing on a street corner and we quickly judge and say, oh, they made, fill in the blank. What do you know different, and what would you challenge people to understand better about those experiencing homelessness?
What I would challenge them is to try to understand that this can happen to anyone. One,
Hmm.
it can happen to anyone. Two, it doesn't define you. Your challenges don't define you the same way your education doesn't define you or your job doesn't define you, right? That moment in time of what you're experiencing doesn't define you. And thirdly, I would say that, we should always be thinking about, well, what can we do? How can we help? Whether it's in getting more involved with your church, whether it's donating if you're in a position to donate, whether it's finding ways to show up in community with others. Um, that person that we see is a symptom of a societal issue, right? A societal problem.
Hmm.
It's not certainly you can always point to, well, they must have made some personal decisions, and sure, but realistically, like, as a society, again, shouldn't we all want to help that person who has
Hmm.
the least so that we can all benefit from it together collectively, right? And so that's kind of where my mind goes. I'm always and I do this a lot with my colleagues, my team, of like challenging of like, well, what's the other side of the coin? Like, let's not allow ourselves to just kind of to understand what we see, but like, let's try to understand what we don't see, and
Hmm.
start there. And I think bringing that kind of humility to the conversation, kind of in everything that you do, is again what allows a lot of this positive momentum to happen too. Because I think in the same way that we do that with that person that's sitting, standing at the corner, we do that with the person who's in the boardroom. And we do that
Hmm.
in the person who's at the podium, right? Like,
Hmm.
we do that same kind of, and if we treat all of them equally or think about them all equally, I think ultimately we're going to be significantly better off.
Yeah. Well, I think Ricardo gets my job now. So welcome to his new podcast.
I
Thank
appreciate
you
it.
so
Thank you
much.
so much. I appreciate
Thank
it. This is
you.
fun. This is awesome.
Thank you so much for sharing your
Uh,
passion, for clearly communicating what you do and helping people understand, for the advocacy, for the people that we serve together. Just thank you for just what you do in the
Absolutely.
community. Thanks for joining us on Not That Different. We're so glad that you joined us, and we hope you learned. If this episode resonated with you, like Ricardo just said, get involved. Get involved in your church, in your community. If you're interested in the work we're doing here at the City Mission, go to thecitymission.org. Sign up for a Volunteer 101. Join our associate board. Find a way to get involved. You can donate here, but you can find a place that's close to you as well. We want you to be involved. So thank you so much for joining us. We hope that you'll like and subscribe. See you next time.